This week, I'll be analyzing the most important parts of the Gachiakuta art style, focusing on the manga version. If you enjoy art style study breakdowns and general art tutorials, make sure to subscribe. As usual, it's important we set goals when doing our art studies. Pick the aspects we want to focus on the most. In my case, I really like the line art style as well as the way they mess with proportions. Their shading style is also pretty interesting. Since I haven't messed with screen tones in the past, this would be a great opportunity for me to learn about them. First, we'll take a look at the proportions and stylization of the anatomy. This style is rather unique in this aspect since they don't follow the standard anime styling template, instead opting for very lanky and tall characters. Their bodies are often very thin. Honestly, in real life, it would definitely be considered or border on unhealthy, with things like the hip bones being rather prominent at times. But despite the very thin figure, things like the hands and feet are on the big side, creating interesting contrast. It reminds me a bit of how Horikoshi, the creator of My Hero Academia, also goes for big hands and feet, but it doesn't usually have his characters be as thin and lanky. The last part about the body is the actual proportions between the top half and the bottom half. The character's legs are generally longer compared to their top half. More simple divisions can be 3 heads for a top half and 4 heads for the bottom half, but a more extreme example is only 2 heads for the top half but 5 heads for the bottom half. Moving on to the actual face and head, parts of the head are actually rather big, like the eyes and the ears. Although in general, I'd say their faces don't stray too far away from typical anime variations, their expressions most certainly are pushed to the extreme. Seriously, they go all out with their expressions, so if you want to learn how to make very expressive characters, they can be a really good reference. Talking about the face, they tend to follow typical anime proportions. One system you can use is to split it up into 2, with everything below the eyebrows being half of the face, and the other half being the top of the head and like the hair. Another is taking the space between the eyes and the eyebrows and using that as reference, so you can place 2 of those below the eyes to create the nose and mouth area, and use 1 or 2 above to create the forehead and rest of the head. The eyes are, of course, usually on the bigger side, taking up more space, with anywhere from a full eye width to 3/4 of an eye apart. The shapes of the eye vary, with scratchy lines included under the eyes to give the illusion of something like eye bags or help give the character a more scruffy look. Eyes also often have thicker eyelids on top or eyelashes on top and thinner on the bottom, with eyelashes sometimes being included more along the bottom side of the eyes. For the hair, it's rather interesting as the main point for the hair is the way the edges aren't sharp but rather rounded, giving it a softer look. The hair is also pretty obviously divided into chunks. Technically, hair is always in chunks, but with the Gachiakuta style, it's usually rather prominent once you notice it. Some extra lines are used between the strands to give more detail to the hair as well. Lastly, even though this isn't part of the anatomy technically, I did want to mention about the fashion used in the show. I feel like the clothing is, in some ways, a really important part of the style, and the clothing really makes use of shapes and is often really big with contrast to the characters' slender frames and any skin-tight clothing they wear underneath. So if you also like the character designs, I recommend looking into creating contrast via shapes through clothing. For line art, this depends. They mention in interviews preferring to use traditional media a lot since the crunchiness you get from traditional media is just basically impossible to fully replicate digitally. But to recreate the look digitally as best as we can, we'd want to use a textured brush and one that varies in thickness. In Clip Studio Paint, I use the Real G Pen brush for this. The line art is rather sketchy, not super clean, and lines tend to be on the thicker end. Things we want to draw attention to, like the character's outline or maybe clothing, often has a thicker outline around it to draw your eyes to it and make it stick out more. Thin lines are still used on the inside for adding smaller details. For rendering, it comes down to hatching and screen tones. For hatching, we want to make use of some lines that specifically follow the shape of what's casting shadow on, adding dimension to the piece. Besides this, screen tones are also used to add some color to things like clothing. Interestingly though, the screen tones can be partially erased, especially on things like buttons where it's almost entirely erased off. Honestly, I wasn't sure how to really replicate this, but the best I came up with was using the Real G Pen brush set to transparent, so it acted as an eraser and randomly erased parts of the screen tone. From what I can tell, I don't think it's following a certain system just based on what looks good. I guess it could also maybe be possible that some of these screen tones just get lost when they get scanned in, but I don't think that's the case. I'm pretty sure they're purposely erasing screen tones or scratching off some of the screen tones. Anyways, I also added a few effects to the line art to help make it look crunchier and more like it was done traditionally. First, I added a noise filter onto the line art using somewhere around 50 for the strength, at least for this piece, and make sure that the color is set to gray. Then I also add a Perlin noise layer, making it a clipping mask so it only appears on the line art. With that, I just mess with the values until I kind of get the texture I want. Alright, before we move on to the master studies and implementation, I just want to say that the next art style study poll is live. In last week's poll, Bungo Stray Dogs won, so that'll be the next video. And for this week, you can vote on Rinse Period Art, Art Soul, Lavender Town, and whoever else appears on the screen right now. I haven't really decided yet, but whoever appears on the screen right now, that's the other option. So if you're interested in more art style studies, please make sure to subscribe, leave your recommendations in the comments below, and head over to the post tab on my channel to vote.